Folks, I'll just spend 2 minutes over here, then I'll turn the lights back on again and come back into the room. All the information you've got in front of you is on Moodle now, apart from the timetable, because the timetable hasn't been confirmed. But it's very, very unlikely not to change. So this is tonight.
Not to change.
What did I say?
Very unlikely not to change.
Will change.
Yeah. Very unlikely to change. Yeah. Okay. Tonight, 19th of June. We're going to do several things really. The first of is answering what questions which have arisen so far, because we'll go away for 3 weeks, we'll start reading the book, start thinking of other things, so we'll mop all those questions up. Then we'll do some more explanation about how the theological reflection groups work, and if possible, we will try and do some small group work there. And also, we will introduce you to the worship design task. What do I mean by that? Those of you who did the introduction to Christian worship module, remember that you had to design a service of the word with 2 or 3 other people for the second Sunday of Advent, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
At summer school, you have to design an act of worship for one of the evening prayers at summer school. And we discovered 2 or 3 years ago, when we had design groups for theological reflection, design groups for worship, and home groups, it was all getting a bit too complicated. So your worship design group will be your theological reflection group. So when you come back again on the 19th of June, by then, the tutors will know what the staffing is, and you will be in your groups, and we will tell you what groups you're in, and we'll actually work in groups at the next session. Hopefully, sometime on worship design and sometime in your group on working about what's going to happen at summer school and how you do the TRs. Okay? So that's the second group. Then here it says optional session 3. Okay? Now this is, when it says optional, it means optional. Some of you have been using Four Source Model because you've been doing the Introduction to Christian Doctrine module and you've written an assignment on it. Some of you haven't done that assignment. Some of you have done Four Source Model elsewhere. Some of you have read material on it before. Some of you may have been introduced to it in Foundations, in passing, and some of you have not. You may all feel you have different levels of skill and ability in it. So what we always do, I always offer optional extra opportunities to come and practice theological reflection. Okay? So the first one is on Saturday the 22nd of June, and it's in Daresbury. And it's completely optional. And it's optional whether you come for the morning or the morning or the afternoon. And the work we do on that day will be determined by who turns up and what it is they say they need. Okay? And then in a similar way, I'm doing exactly the same thing on Wednesday the 10th of July here. Okay? So that's 2 optional sessions, Wednesday the 10th of July and Saturday the 22nd of June, in order to do more work on how to use the theological reflection model. Is that okay? 10th of July. Wednesday the 10th of July, in here, 7 o'clock. Or, I mean, last year some people came to both. Last year, very impressively, somebody flew to the Isle of Man and came to the day one, which was, was good. And I did find, well, I think Christopher and I found on the other tutors, that you could tell the people who had more opportunity to practice. And if you haven't got opportunity to practice, not to your detriment, it's just if you get more opportunity to practice, you'll get more out of it. You'll enjoy it and you'll contribute more. And it is much more likely to become a ministerial skill that you'll take with you beyond All Saints, rather than something I just did for that module. Okay? And some of you will be able to get that experience elsewhere. I mean, some of you may have joined up with your friends or peers to do a theological reflection for your assignment. Some of you are working on your own because you have no choice. We're just trying to offer opportunities, but they are very clearly optional. Is that okay? In which case, I'll turn the lights back on then. Great. Yes, thank you. When you delve a bit more into the reading, basically the things I've given you tonight are simply printouts of the stuff that's on Moodle. You'll notice on the bit that says reflection groups, find out where I've written it now. Okay, but go to the page that says notes on model and methods. It says pastoral encounters on the other side. It doesn't actually say this overtly, but it's implied. What I'm trying to say is, at summer school, you must use a model of theological reflection in the theological reflection groups. This piece of paper repeats something that some of you may have had for the Introduction to Christian Doctrine module, which teases out the way I use definitions of the differences between model and method. Okay? So the book you've got, Straw for the Bricks. Where are my books gone? Somebody's nicked my book. She's looking up people she knows. Oh dear. This is the four-source model, but for those of you who have read it will know that it offers 7 different methods within the model. And some of you will be aware, for example, that pastoral cycle is a model, but there are different versions of it used by different people, and I tend to call them methods of the pastoral cycle. So on here, for example, it says, there are a number of theological reflections all told, so the Whitehead's 3-source model, John Killendebeer's 4-source model, the theological reflections, critical conversation, Stephen Patterson, and the pastoral cycle. And some of these models have different variations, which we call methods. So the Whiteheads offer one model with one method, Killendebeer offer one model with 10 methods, and the pastoral cycle model has a number of methods developed by different people, Andrew Todd, Emmanuel Larty, Laurie Green, etc., etc. In the theological reflection groups, you can choose which model of reflection you want to use. You don't have to use 4-source model. Okay? The only caveat to not using 4-source model, and this is not meant to put you off, but it's just to be clear about it. If you choose to use a model of theological reflection that nobody in the group knows, how do you handle that? It's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination, but you have to work out how to handle that. And on the...
I just ask, who chooses which model you're going to use?
The facilitators. Facilitators stroke mentors. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, and also on those tabs, where it says Jane Leach, I put another model of theological reflection because Jane Leach has a model of theological reflection which is outlined in her book and fully described in another article, which is linked there so you can get to the full text. So for example, if you read the Jane Leach book and get very excited by her work, then you might say, well actually I want to use the model of reflection that Jane Leach uses. Fine. You just need to work out how to make it work within the group. And it depends how well you know your own model. So you would not be surprised to hear, for example, that I am quite comfortable leading a group in a model of theological reflection using the 4-source model with a group of 8 people who have never done it before. I am quite comfortable to do that because I inverted commas, think I know what I'm doing. There are some disadvantages of doing that if you think you are new to something. So you might want to discern what's the skill set you've got in your group, and therefore which model is going to be the most appropriate one. So you'd not be surprised to hear that most people go with the 4-source model, but we are very clear, and the Durham regulations are very clear, that we don't tell you which model to use. What we do at All Saints is we favour pastoral cycle in the first year, and we favour 4-source model in the second year, so that you've been introduced to a variety of models. Okay? I'm heading for 2:45 the latest so we can do our worship. Somebody was asking me a question about the group process skill sheet from the corner there. Was it? Who was asking the group process? Was it?
I've asked,
Yep.
on the group process skill,
Yep.
could you just clarify and define what you mean by the term gatekeeper?
Okay. So on the reading list, on the wider reading list, you'll find at least one book on group process, for example. There are shelf loads of very good books written on the group process, and sometimes they do use slightly different terminology depending on which model they favour. But in a number of models of group process, gatekeeping will be the shorthand term we'd use to describe the way in which you let people in or you keep people out of a conversation in a group. That makes sense? So I say, hang on, Anthony, just give Christopher a chance. Yeah? Or you say, Anthony, come on in, the water's lovely. You know what I mean? It's the kind of, that's what gatekeeping is. And it happens all the time, even though sometimes it may be happening subconsciously, but sometimes it happens extremely overtly. Yeah. And if you are mentoring, facilitating, encouraging any kind of group, you would never put anybody on the spot. You would never say, well, you've been quiet all night, tell me something. But on the other hand, you would be aware if somebody hadn't spoken, and you'd be trying to find ways to see if they wanted to come in, because that's gatekeeping. Because people like me, who are extrovert, we're not careful, we talk all the time and dominate everything. So the person who's facilitating keeps an eye on actually what's happening in the group. And anybody in the group can be a gatekeeper, whether you're the person who happens to be facilitating, or the person telling the story, or being a member of staff. Okay? So basically, the kind of skills sets that are in the group processing you would find in the book and group process, the skill set that's in the theological reflection you find by reading the chapters in here, but particularly the chapter on, chapter 4 is the basic, chapter 3 is the basic model, you need to know that, as it were, in your bones, and chapter 4 is basically becoming a better facilitator and mentor. Yeah. And then the second half of the book is all about application. Can I say now as well, because if not careful, even I forget to say this, the theological reflection model you use at summer school, and for which you, and not just that model, but your ability to participate and lead theological reflection that you're being assessed on, is only a tool in the pastoral care module. It's not, this is not the theological reflection module. Yeah? But what we're saying is that you and Kelly said it's about knowing yourself. And the second thing about knowing yourself is knowing how you operate in a group. And if we're trying to model this business of coming to a ministry team meeting, this is basically what Jane Leach is talking about, really, about pastoral supervision. It's about members of a ministry team being corporately pastoral supervisors to each other. And she has a chapter in there specifically on supervision in a group as well. But it's practicing all those kinds of skills. So one of the things you want to be aiming for in a theological reflection, both as a facilitator and a presenter and as a participant, is during that theological reflection, and definitely towards the end, but at any point, making what are the ministerial implications and connections for pastoral care. And you might even, without being clever about it, or say, well, you know, Kelly says, you know, or Jane Leach poses the idea that, because that's how you're demonstrating to the tutors that you are acquiring the skills necessary for pastoral care and understanding. And of course, you do exactly the same thing when you're writing your summative reflection. Okay? I think the only thing I haven't covered so far is that it says on the timetable the TR takes 2 hours. At first sight, that seems a long time until you suddenly realise you've only got 20 minutes to go. So part of the skill for the facilitators and the presenter and all the members of the group is being timekeepers. We keep, knowing where we are. Then we break for half an hour for coffee. Then we come back and we have an hour, which is called unpacking. And the purpose of unpacking is to find out what we've learned about our ability to facilitate and participate in theological reflection, our ability as a group to participate in theological reflection, and our understanding of pastoral care. Yeah? And what we do in that group is that 9 times out of 10, unless something else is a good reason to do otherwise, my practice is usually to say to the facilitators or mentors, tell us how you think that those 2 hours went. What was it like? Because they're the ones who've been facilitating us. And then we give them the opportunity to ask people in the group to give them feedback on how they thought it went. And then we all talk about how well we think we're doing as a group, what the kind of things as a group we need to practice. And then we talk about what are the implications for ministerial practice. If we don't do the implications of ministerial practice, then it's becoming a module in theological reflection, not pastoral care.
I don't think I'm reading this timetable. It looks to me as if we've got an hour for the morning sessions and a 2-hour TR2.
think it might just be the way the columns work out. But basically, TR1 starts at 9 o'clock. That's a typo. That's a typo. Otherwise, I've got an hour and a half for coffee. Yeah, the first session runs from 9 to 11. Then coffee's at 11:30, and then we unpack until 12:30, and then there's what time? Lunch at 1 o'clock. All right? Yeah, that's it. Thank you for that. I'll try. I'm just going to do that before I put it on move.
Sitting there with our coffee doing the second section. Which we will.
And so one of the things that we begin to build into this cycle every day over 5 days is the opportunity, I've said this really carefully, for each one of us to use the opportunity to optionally ask for feedback. And you can be very specific about the kind of feedback you want. So if you've been the person who's been leading the session for 2 hours facilitating, you might say, I don't want any feedback. I'm not in the right place today. I don't want to do feedback. Or you might say, what I'd like feedback on is whether you think I was too quiet, or whether you think I was too directive, or whatever. And another person will say, I'm absolutely fine. Please give me feedback on whatever you want, bearing in mind the purpose of feedback is to enable us to learn. Yeah? And therefore the best feedback is actually appreciative. By appreciative I mean, this is what you did, this is what would make it better, as opposed to this is what went wrong. So it's the manner, you can still give very rigorous feedback appreciatively, which really gets to actually what happened and what the process was behind it, without saying that appearing to be negative. But the crucial thing about feedback in these groups is that the responsibility for asking for feedback lies with the individual, and one of the jobs of the staff in the group at that moment is to make sure people don't start to offer feedback to people that has not been asked for. So to me, this is what I call a safety issue. So the staff are members of the group, but at all times the members of staff are responsible for the safety of the group and for individuals in that group, as we all are, but they take a further responsibility. Excuse me, it's their job, it's what they've turned up for. Is that okay?
Go on.
One very quick question. So we have to come with a pastoral situation that we are going to use for the theological reflection. So for each of us have to bring one first, don't we?
Yes, I think it's on pastoral accountancy.
Does it have to be a real one?
Yes. The reason it has to be real is because you've got to have some investment in it. One of the ways in which some of the books on theological reflection try to coach people in theological reflection is to use case studies. I've always found case studies really unhelpful. One of the things I find in case studies is people spend all the time arguing about the details of the case study when they can never find out because it's nobody's experience. And they just waste time arguing about the case study. So it needs to be something that has happened to you. And on the page that says pastoral encounters, I've done those 3 different things from Osmer about situations, episodes, situations and contexts. So if I use my own language, an episode is what happens when I bump into somebody in Tesco. So I bump into somebody in Tesco and they say, I'm sorry, just I spilled your beans in the accounts. And you may have a brief conversation. Okay. A situation is the story and the person in the shop tell me about what's happening in her life over the course of the last several weeks. So it's something that's going on in her life now, yeah. And the context might be in the situation shared with me by the person in the shop takes place in the context of the National Health Service in England. So you see what I mean? All those are worthy of theological reflection. And I would suggest that when we're fairly new to this, and we've only got 2 hours, it's either the first or the second. And you don't do world peace. World peace is worthy of theological reflection, but not necessarily for this portfolio.
Do you want to see those beforehand, or do you literally
What we've done as a matter of practice, we don't require this, but we think it works. We say that it's a good discipline to try and write down your episode or situation in 200 words, because it kind of focuses the mind. And 200 words, once you read it out loud, is about the right length of story or situation to tell. And we say, hand those into it doesn't matter how you do it, email's probably the best you think, to the tutors who are running your group, so that we know what the ones are on offer. Because the bottom line is, if there's 7 or 8 in your group, we can't use them all. You know what I mean? And what I've tended to do in previous years is I decide on the first couple, and decided what the latter ones will be, seeing where the groups got up to. And even then last year, when we got something like TR4, the group decided to do a TR of something which wasn't any of the ones that had already been handed in, because we have that freedom. We are a learning community. But if you do decide to do it, which I would encourage, you can then put it in your portfolio, because it might be something you can refer to. You see. Even if your situation doesn't have a theological reflection on it, there's still value in writing it up and putting it in your portfolio. Chris, do you think I've missed out any massive? Well, I'll think about it on the way home, of course. No, we missed out. We're just trying to give you a flavour of how it works, aren't we? Really? Yeah. I've got a little service of night prayer for us to finish with, but we've still got a few more minutes yet.
So can we just go through,
Yeah.
between now and summer school,
Yeah.
we need to write our book review.
Yeah. Hand it in by the 10th of July.
Yeah. We're keeping our journal.
Yeah.
And come up with a pastoral encounter, which ideally we would write.
Yeah, pastoral counter by the very, very latest when you arrive at summer school. When I say that is, with the best will in the world, the tutors will talk about the ones you've had in when we get there. You know what I mean? So it's quite nice to have them by Friday afternoon when we get there. So we've only got half a dozen, so we know, or 5. We need one for Saturday morning. And in terms of the timetable, perhaps the only things I haven't talked about is on Friday night, the groups meet separately, you know, as a group, to set up the week. You know, some of you, it might be that a staff member hasn't been able to get here yet. It might be the first time you meet a staff member, so we'll do gentle introductions. Even though you all know each other, that will be the first proper meeting of that group, which will have its last proper meeting at the end of the week, and that group itself has a life. You know, it didn't exist before, it won't exist afterwards. All that has to be taken seriously by you and by the staff. And there's a kind of session on, is it Wednesday afternoon that says take and stop, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Basically, each group meets again on their own to say, well, you know, how are we doing? When is it? We just say, we have an hour, you say, how are we doing? Well, how's it going? Do we want to do it? Is it something we haven't tried yet? Has anybody got any ideas? You know, that's the point at which you, as individuals, we might look at the 2 assessment things and say, have I had the chance to show any of those things so far? And don't go rushing into the next section quoting, you know, leech at the top of your voice or whatever, but, you know, just say, oh, I've not really said much, have I? So perhaps I should just make a bit more, you know, effort to kind of just try and cover the things that are being looked for. Yeah? And whenever something's assessed, whether it's a written thing or in the room, it's always slightly artificial, because it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, the tutors can only assess you on what they see. You know what I mean? They can't assess on, oh, I know he's really good. Yeah, but was he really good at summer school? You know, that's all we can do, to be fair to everybody. Yeah? And we all have good and bad days.
Will it be a group preparation session on the Friday when you decide what order people are going to go in, or will that be decided before?
It will be decided before, and with a bit of luck it will be on Moodle probably by the beginning of that week. Hopefully your groups will be decided by the next time you come, and then hopefully the pairings will be sorted out. Because basically the schedule is who you paired with and which day you're going. What you won't know until the Friday night is what the subject matter is. And that's interesting, because that's my way of saying that if this works well, you don't need to know, as a facilitator, you don't need to know the things being brought to you inside out. Your job isn't to be the expert on the subjects being talked about. Your job is to facilitate the theological reflection of the people in the room. It's not your job, because you're a facilitator, it's not your job to solve the problem, or even to know where this theological reflection is going to go, because you don't. That's part of the skill of leading it, really.
Can I just,
Yeah.
it takes a while sometimes things to sink in.
That's fine.
Very quickly.
That's why I do answering questions again next time. No, I mean seriously.
Please. I'll have a list next time. So we don't all get an opportunity to lead.
We all get an opportunity to facilitate because you work in pairs. So over 5 sessions, there's 10 slots for people to facilitate.
Of course, it's difficult.
But there's there's only 5 slots to present. And as I said in my group last year, one of those slots, we didn't do one of the presentation, we did something different anyway, because that's what the group decided we wanted to do. That's what we thought would extend our learning, about this and about pastoral care. So we did something different, because we have that freedom. Within the bounds of making sure everybody gets a chance to facilitate. And what we like to do, which is why I'm just being slightly cagey about how many groups are at the moment, because we're just struggling a bit with numbers of staff at the moment, because this is actually the largest group we've ever had, pastoral care at summer school. We like there to be, in an ideal world, we like there to be more slots than pairs, because it gives us freedom to do other things. Yeah.
And around the numerical thing, you keep saying we work in pairs.
Yeah.
And you said that each group would be 7 to 8 people.
Yeah.
So what happens to the other one?
Somebody volunteers to go again. Yeah, just because, yeah.
Does that mean that you could end up doing more than one?
Yeah. Yeah. You would not be compelled to.
What are the sources? What access to them do you have to
What do you mean by sources? It's whatever the people. Just ask me.
I asked about what other sources we might be drawing on as part of our theological reflection. And I was thinking about scripture, theological works, social work theory, all sorts of things like that. Will we have a bank of
And
things to draw?
it's whatever the group in each particular room brings to the group.
Right.
I am slightly horrified if I turn up and find there isn't a Bible in the group.
Oh, of course.
You say, of course. Christopher and I have both been there before. When we say open the scriptures and we go, what? No Bible? Weird. On the last tab here, I've also got a list of other resources that are available online. All the ones in blue have all got links. So, but it does mean it is what the people bring to the room. And so, if you, and that's how sometimes the direction of the group might change during the week, because the group, for some wonderful reason, might suddenly decide that for our final reflection we're going to do Tillich. Well, that requires somebody in the room to know something about Tillich. Otherwise, it'll be a fairly short theological reflection. So you have to find what the resources are. Or a very the theological reflection doesn't even start. And if I'm going to stop in a couple of minutes, folks, but just to remind you that you might have thought it was a bit weird when we kicked off tonight. My sole aim tonight is to help you to understand how this module works. Because my aim and all of our aim is for everyone to shine in this module and enjoy it and acquire ministerial skills and confidence. Yeah, that's what it's about. Have any of you heard horror stories from last year?
When they came out of those rooms.
But when you ask them now, they all say it was a really positive experience. Even though at the time it looked horrific, if you ask them again now, and I said that was horrid, and they say, oh actually it was alright, it was really good experience. So ask them again.
They did have, and we've not got on the samples.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I'm unapologetically biased toward four source model and some other theological reflection models, as opposed to pastoral cycle, is that it takes experience really seriously. And none of us know, myself included and Christopher, what comes into that room when people bring things in. I don't know what might touch something in my experience. And because of the nature of the work, I can't predict what's going to happen in the work. And some of you will know, for example, well, you all on the funerals weekend. Nearly all, quite a lot of it. I mean, people react to the funerals weekend in different ways because some things touch our experience. Well, the models of theological reflection that we prefer and are connected with Ewan Kelly and Jane Leach all have your experience in the theological reflection. So even when you're dealing with somebody else, when you're ministering to somebody else, your experience is in that ministry. And if we can't deal with our own experience, then we've had it. And there's nothing wrong with getting upset and nothing wrong with crying, if that's actually what happens, if that's what our experience is, because we're human beings. But yeah, sometimes when you're in the first year, these people come out of the looking a little bit jaded from TRs. Well, apart from anything else, we've just been working non-stop for 2 hours without a break. And it's very emotional in the sense that it engages your emotions. It's also about what we call our emotional competence, and that includes the staff as well. And that's why I think this work's really important, actually. And you don't get that. You get it a bit sometimes in people's journals, but you don't get it in writing essays, basically. Yeah. Okay. Let me just. I've got a little PowerPoint for our worship to finish. Let me just pop it up and explain how it works. So I'm willing to bet that some of you are familiar with Northumbrian Community. So this is a Northumbrian Community night prayer, but presented in a PowerPoint. So some of the kind of normal rules are a bit different. So whenever there's an asterisk, it means that it goes to the person's left who last spoke. If you're not familiar with Northumbrian Circle Prayer, the whole idea of it is that it actually doesn't have a leader, and the prayer goes round the group. And so every time there's an asterisk, it changes to the person on your left. So for example, if I was speaking and we got to an asterisk, it would then go to Pam, and then go around the room. Yeah. The words in yellow, we all say together. So that's like bold in Gong worship, yeah? Right? And the words in italic are said by each person in turn. So we're going to go all the way around the room. So if I just go on ahead a little bit, we all say that together. I'm actually then going to ask Pam to start it. So she'll start with Father bless the word, then it will go to her left, then left again. And then whoever gets there first, say it's Nicola. Nicola says, Thou Lord God of power, and then it just goes round the room. So we each pray that in turn. And then whenever we get back to again, we all do that together. And then that goes to next person, next person, next person, next person, and that gets to the end. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot in it. Oh, crikey. Backspace is good, isn't it? So the asterisk, change of reader, yellow together, words said by each person in turn. Is that okay? So when the next slide comes up, when you're ready, just leave it a few seconds and you mind kicking us off, is that okay? Together. Come, Lord,
as you still the soul. Still me, O Lord, keep me from harm. Let all the tumult within me cease. Enfold me, Lord, in your peace.
Father, bless the work that is done and the work that is to be.
Father, bless the servant that I am and the servant that I will be.
O Lord and God of power, shield and sustain
and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
O Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
O Lord of God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord of God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord of God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Our Lord and God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
Thou Lord of God of power, shield and sustain me this night.
I will lie down this night with God, and God will lie down with me. I will lie down this night with Christ, and Christ will lie down with me. I will lie down this night with the Spirit, and the Spirit will lie down with me. God and Christ and the Spirit be lying down with me.
The peace of God be over me to shelter me,
Under me to uphold,
About me to protect me.
Behind me to direct me.
Ever with me to save me.
The peace of all peace be mine this night. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Sorry. Oh, right.
We'll have to do two.